Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dear students, Assalamu alaikum and welcome to online lecture 11 of Programming Fundamentals course. Inshallah, today we are going to discuss in more detail about reference and value parameters. So with that, let me outline today's lecture. So far, we have learned how to construct and use void function in a program. In the previous lecture, we were discovering the difference between value and reference parameter. Today, inshallah, we are going to continue our talk on the difference between value and reference parameter, and then we are going to explore a reference parameter and value returning function, and we are also going to see and learn about the scope of an identifier. So with that, let us jump to our topic. So we are going to differentiate, once again we are going to differentiate between reference and parameter using by understanding a C++ program. So this program is about makes you think. So you have to think about it. You have to think about the scope of a variable. You have to think about how a reference of a variable is affected and how a copy of a variable is affected. Remember, a local scope or a local variable is only visible to a particular function, whereas a global variable is visible to all of the functions. So with that, we include the IOStream header file for the necessary scene and cout output stream. We include the namespace, and then we declare three user-defined function. All of them have a void return type. So we have add first function, double first function, and square first function. In add first function, we are passing the references. So both variable are passed as reference, which means that the first and the second variable will have their address passed whenever the add function is called. And then in the double first function, we are only calling or passing the variable values. So we are not passing the variable addresses, we are just passing, we are making a copy of a variable values. So in the third function, which is called square first, we are passing the address of ref variable, and in the second case we are just passing a copy of the val variable. So these are the three declaration, or you can say signature or prototype of variables. Remember, they have a void return type and they have two parameters, but we are going to understand how a references and how function when function is called, and how the copy of variable is made. So we are going to differentiate between reference and value variables or parameters. So with that, let us jump to the main function of our program. Remember, the main has a return type int. So here we are going to say that it will return an int number. So here the int number is 0. It can be anything. It tells the compiler that we have successfully executed all of the instruction inside the main function. So with that, we first declared the main we declare a variable called num and assign it a value of 5, and then we just display the value of num, which it should display the 5. So remember, whatever is inside the double quote is printed exactly what it is. So it will be, so we are going to print line 1 colon inside main colon num and assign equals operator, and then the value of num, which is 5, will be printed. And then we call the first function. Remember, the first function is called by passing the reference of both num1, this first number, and the second number. So when we call this add function, the execution stops here, and we jump to the execution stops here and we jump to the add first function. So this is the add function. Remember, we got the address of num in first variable and num was the second variable. So this means that the same address is also passed in this second variable. So first will have the same address and the second will also have the same address. So inside this add first function, we displayed the value of first and second. So both of them will display a value of 5. And then we add first 2 with the first and store it again in the first variable. So we will be having 7 value here. So when we once again uh, print the value of first and second, so because the second also have the address which the first has, so it means that the first as well as the second variables will affect it. So here we will get 7 for the first and of course 7 for the second, and then once again we multiplied this 7 by 2, so we get the result of 14 and store it in this 14 variable. But remember, 14 is the is holding second is holding the address of the address of num variable, and the same address is also in the first variable. So the first will be the changes will be reflected in the first variable, in the second variable, and in the num variable. So we will get 14 here as well as 14 here. So let us like check our answer by, let me go to the output. So inside the main, the value of num was 5. So initially when we print the value of first and second, it was 5 and 5, and then we added 2 with the first, so the same change was also reflected in second. So 7 is printed here, 7 is printed here. Similarly, when we multiplied 7 by 2, so when we multiply second by 2, so the change is reflected here and also in the first variable. So you can see here that 14 is displayed, 7 is displayed, and here 5 is displayed. So here you can see 5 7 14 and 14. So after we executed the first function, so inside the main function, the because we were having the address of num and the last value which was changed, uh, the address that was holding the address of num, so that were both first and second, so the last value was 14. So 14 will be also displayed over here, because now we are working on address. So and we are directly changing the value of the memory location where num is pointing to. And then in the second case we are calling the double first function, but here in this case we are passing the variable only the variable values. So this is called call by values, whereas this is called call by reference. So in call by values, a copy of the two variables are made. So here we will get a copy of num1, which so far is 14, and then another copy of num which is also a 14. So with that, let us jump to the double first. So here we will get a value of 14, and in two variable we will also get a value of 14. So inside double first we are printing 1 which is 14, and we are printing 2 which is also 14. But now as a copy is made, so this one is totally independent of the calling variables, and this 2 is also totally independent of 1 and of these num. So change to 1 will be not reflected in 2 because they are independent, because we have a call by value, and changes made to 2 is also not reflected to into the 1 or into the calling function variables. So now we change 1, so 14 is multiplied by 2, and we get the value of 28. So here when we displayed 1 we will get 28, whereas let me change the pointer, whereas for 2 it will be still it will be 14. But now if we change this to, so we are saying this 14 plus 2 makes 16, so 16 is copied over here. And then when we once again print the values, the one will be having value of 28, whereas the 2 will have the value of 16. So okay, so with that let me check the output. So here inside the main, the num value was 14, which is correct. So inside the double first, initially we get 14 for 1 and 14 for 2, and then we multiplied 14 with 2, so the value of 1 gets changed, and this change is only reflected in the variable 1, whereas the 2 and num are unaffected, so 2 still have the value of 14. But later on we add 2 to the value of 2, and then 14 plus 2 makes 16, and 1 is still unaffected. So then after, because call by value was made, so inside main after double first we still, the num has the value of 14 because we only make a copy of num. The address of num was not passed to the function. So with that, let us go back to our main function, and now we are going to call this square first function. So in square first, the first value is the address, whereas the second value is just a copy of this variable. So in the first case we are passing the address of num, and in the second case we are just making a copy of num. So with that, let us move to square first. So here we get the copy of num, the address of num, and here we get the value of num. So the value of num is 14, whereas the address of num is the address of num, whatever it is. So inside square function we print the ref. So the ref is pointing to the value of 14, so 14 get printed, and here val has the value of 14, 14 gets printed. Then we are multiplying this 14 with 14 because we are saying the address, the value stored at this address is multiplied by the value stored at this address. So the same value 14 is stored here and 14 is stored here. So 14 gets multiplied by 14. So whatever is the result is stored in this ref. And once again, when we print this value, so the ref gets the value of 14 multiplied by 14, and the val gets value of only 14, and then we add 2 to the val, we get 16. So in this case here we will be having value of 16, whereas the ref will be having value of 14 multiplied by 14. So let us see the answer. So in the first case the ref was having 14 and the val was having 14, but in the second case we multiply 14 with 14, we get the result of 196. But this was not reflected in val because a copy was made, that copy of num was made to the val variable, and then we add 2 to the val, that makes 16, and then the ref was unaffected. So similarly, when we then after the execution of square first inside main, after square first, when we print the value of num, it was 196 because we change the value that was stored at the address of num. So here you can see that inside main, after yes, inside square first ref, so this is square first, and yes, inside main, after square first, so the num was having value of 196, which is 14 multiplied by 14. So this is how the reference, the variable reference and the variable value works. Reference mean we are passing the reference of a variable. Call by reference mean that we are passing the address of a variable, whereas call by value mean we are just making a copy and sending a copy of a variable to the calling function. Changes made to changes made to the variable on the copy of a variable will not affect change in the main function, whereas when you call a function by a reference, so changes made in the user defined function will also be reflected in the main function. So here you can see when add first was called, we were having the first was holding the address of this location, the second was also holding the address of this location, and num was holding the address of this location. So whatever changes are made uh, to this address either by first or second or by num, so the changes is reflected in all of these reference variable, in first, in second, and in num. Whereas in the double case we were only making copy. So num, the copy of num variable, the value of num, which is 14, so a copy is sent to 1 and is also sent to 2. So and then we have a square first where a reference of num was passed to ref. So ref was pointing to the same variable as num, and value have a copy of num. So if we change this value, it will not be reflected in num, whereas if the change was made using ref variable, so this change will be reflected in the num variable. So this is how the program works. So we have a function called by reference and called by value, and there is a difference. So understanding of these two different concepts is very essential. So with that, I'm going to stop this lecture, and inshallah I'll see you in the next lecture. So till then, take care and Allah.